Hi, welcome to the Wheelhouse Web Solutions podcast. This is episode 2, I think. You guys are special to be the second one. We should do this more often. We, I'm here with my colleague Danielle. Danielle, if you want to introduce yourself real quick.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'm Danielle Feole. I'm a graphic designer and I help with the digital ad design, but
awesome.
we specialize in print.
Yeah, and other pieces for political work. Awesome. And I'm forgot to introduce myself. I'm Theo Groh. I'm the founding partner at Wheelhouse Web Solutions. Do digital strategy and some of the a lot of the ad placement alongside Danielle, and some of the analytics work. And we wanted to have this conversation with Matt and Beck from 603 Forward and the Ford Foundation because we've been working with them for like years now and doing a lot of really interesting stuff. So wanted to just chat about what we do and how we do it and how that's really impacted how they're able to do their work and what we've been able to do with this partnership. And so I really appreciate both of them being there. Beck, would you want to introduce yourself, what your role is and
Yeah.
how it all works?
Hello, I'm Beck. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Leadership Development Director with 603 Forward. So I lead our candidate recruitment and support work.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Beck. Matt?
Awesome. Yeah, my name is Matt Mooshian. I T him pronouns. I'm the program director with 603 Forward and the Ford Foundation. And previously, I served as our advocacy and engagement director. And I've been with 603 Forward since like the beginning, like 4 years now. And Theo, I think, yeah, we've been working together for as long as I can remember through that. So it's been a while.
Yeah, creating good trouble since then. I also use he, him pronouns. Danielle, if you want to share yours, that's great as well.
She, her.
Yep, awesome. So I wanted to just chat a bit about if you all wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about what 603 Forward is and does, and the Ford Foundation, and a little bit about the difference between that, because a lot of our work hinges around the different pieces of work that you all do.
Yeah. 603 Ford is New Hampshire's, and I think probably New England's leading premier leadership development hub. So our primary goal is to uh, what we call build the next generation of leadership in New Hampshire. So we're looking to get more people, more young folks, more working age people engaged in the political process. And thinking about the things that impact them in their community, and then ultimately get them thinking about offices that they can run for or appointed positions that they can seek. And Beck can fact check me on this, but I think to date we've helped about 500 people, young people, explore a run for office, and now there's about 400 that are serving. Beck, correct? I'm
Yeah,
getting the nod.
of that age demographic, yeah, we've helped over 500 people, young working age people, explore running for office, and over 400 of them are currently serving.
Yeah. And for the
Yes.
readers and listeners at home, like young in New Hampshire for us is 15 under. The average age of the New Hampshire state legislature is like 65, I think last I heard. It
Mhm.
fluctuates. But I think the last time a study like that was done, it was around 65. So, and you elect more working age people who are 15 under, you're doing actually a good job of lowering that average age of legislature and also just getting more people in the state house who have the experience of juggling a family, working a job, and know what it's like to, need to balance these priorities to show up.
Absolutely. And for some context as well, 65 as the average age in the legislature is a huge improvement. I want to say that before 603 Forward existed and other organizations like the Young Dems in New Hampshire doing this kind of work, the average age in the legislature when I ran was in the upper 70s. I want to say it was like 73, 74. So 65 is
Crazy.
like massive.
And the average age of like the average Granite Stater is like what, like in the mid 40s or something like that, like mid to
Yeah.
late 40s, I think. Yeah, so wild.
And it's really interesting because that's I think it's fair to say that 603 Forward and the Ford Foundation are on the progressive side of the spectrum for organizations. And so it's was a really interesting journey for me looking at elected officials making those decisions and seeing that you can have people who agree with you on paper politically, who, if they don't understand the issues, especially around working families, around some of these issues that are particularly impactful for young people, that it doesn't matter if they've got the same party registration as you or if they have
Yeah,
the same politics on paper. And so that's been really interesting. I think there are particular issues around housing in some cases, or around childcare, around I want to say, like, had some fascinating conversations with folks in New Hampshire, with legislators in New Hampshire who they paid their way through college working like a part-time job.
yeah,
That's not even like thinkable on any level for anyone in our generation. So, but it's hard because they don't necessarily have that context, and so it's a lot of education through the advocacy side, and also electing folks who can speak to that and can
yeah.
also educate their fellow legislators.
We We definitely like we always say we're working to build a New Hampshire where the next generation can thrive. And we recognize that we are going to need um, a broad coalition of folks to achieve that. And we're super proud to have worked with Democrats, Republicans, Independents, anyone who, believes in that shared vision of a New Hampshire where everyone has ability to thrive and not just survive here, and we can all build that life. And then also, I should mention, I'm talking about like 603 Forward, but the Ford Foundation, 603 Forward's sister organization, as you will, is really also um, focused on building and like fostering a good culture of civic engagement in New Hampshire. So, creating more opportunities for folks to know what's happening at the local level, breaking down barriers to let people know about all the different types of like nonpartisan appointed positions that they can seek in their community, from library trustee to zoning board to arts and culture commission if they care about that type of stuff. And also really interested, like we've talked about 603 Forward working to elect all these young people. What we're also trying to do with the Ford Foundation is answer the question of like, all right, you got elected, you're in there. Now what do you do? And we want to provide trainings and resources on like how to just be the best elected official you can be, to make your community proud and to also, deliver on the things that matter to your neighbors and your community.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think is so important that we help out with on the digital side, and that you all do, is do a lot of like explainer content. Like, what is how the heck does the New Hampshire state legislature work? So we have a really interesting, we've got the biggest, I think it's the the fourth largest state legislature in the English speaking world, which is wild. And then this really tiny Senate. And so, like, how do bills go through the legislative process? So much of what I think happens with our generation, especially folks working two jobs, folks who have kids, folks who are going to school and working, it's really, really hard to have the kind of bandwidth to keep up with like the intricacies of politics, especially with state level and local politics. There's a lot of political jargon, and I think it's a really interesting exercise for all of us who are like in that space to think about how much like ground knowledge do we already have to be able to understand what's going on at any given time. And I think you all do an amazing job of taking that and translating it to like, hey, here are the five things you need to know right now about what's happening in at the state level on housing. Or like explainer content of like, what on earth is the state budget and how does it work? What's the budget cycle? Who makes those
Yeah.
decisions? Where does it go through the process? And we've had some really interesting conversations when we're trying to get. I mean, so that is like its own bucket of work that we do, which is trying to engage young people around that. The other interesting bucket I think we do is like, where can we give folks the opportunity to communicate with their legislators at certain like key moments in the legislative process. And I think that really like speaks to the advocacy work. Where is it going to be really, really useful for a committee person to get a bunch of phone calls or a bunch of emails? Where is it worth it to have like the governor have their inbox flooded by real stories of real people talking about their real housing experiences? Where is it like what I have so much admiration for that you all do is really figuring out like sometimes it's like changing local zoning laws in the city of Manchester and like following a really kind of obscure process all the way through. Um, because you all know what's going on and you know how impactful it is, and then you provide the opportunity for folks who do care about it in the city to really impact it by telling them when the hearings are, who to talk to, what the by really following that process. And I feel like the role that we play with you all is helping use these digital tools to give people those opportunities.
Yeah, and like it's important. Like it's important to everyone. Okay, let me back up. Everyone cares about what's going on in different ways, right? And like we all hear the stuff around like, oh, this bill's going through committee, this bill that's going to do this to your election thing, and it can happen so quickly. But yeah, it's really important to us to like take a moment to pause and say like, what are the top things that people need to know about this? And peel back for them like why this matters in their everyday life, and then exactly what you said, like take it a step further and like, okay, so now like you know about this and what can you do about it? And for us, like we recognize people are busy, especially the people that we're trying to talk to who are working age people who are parents. So it does often look like, hey, can you send this quick email to this decision maker? Can you pick up the phone and call this person? Even sometimes we've done stuff where it's like share your story, and people have done that in the comments, and then we've taken the things from the comments and given it to the people. Um, but yeah, like giving folks not just like the information, like that is the most important thing. I think that they're armed with like knowing how this is going to impact them in their community, but then also giving them like the tangible thing to do about it. And then that's also where like y'all at Wheelhouse help us to get that in front of people. Like we obviously like we're working every day to grow our network and to meet new people and to be out in the field meeting folks and meeting folks on social media. But at the end of the day, we recognize that like we need to work with partners to be able to like get that message amplified out so that all the people we're seeing it are engaging with it. Um, and then also like from the perspective of those people who are on the receiving end of the action, whether it's the email or the phone calls, they also get like a full diversity of the state of New Hampshire reaching out to them with the message of, you know, whatever it is at that time. But I do think like so much of advocacy is figuring out the like what the top things are, what are the impacts, and then finding a way for people to like take that rage basically that they're going to feel once they realize, you know, if it's the state budget that millionaires in New Hampshire are getting rewarded while they're going to be getting less in their checks. Um, what do you do about that? Well, you tell the people who are doing that enough's enough. Like stop the steal, basically. But yeah,
And I think one of the things that's really interesting that we being able to work with each other over multiple years, we've been able to do a lot of experimentation, both with messaging, but also with tactics. And one of the things I think I'd be curious, Beck, for your insights on this, but one of the things we found is that straight up asking people to run for office is often a big ask. It's sometimes a bigger ask than they're comfortable with. And part of what we've discovered is can we run issue ads or have people talk to their select board or email a committee, come give testimony, where we basically built like a ladder of engagement with the goal that people do run for office, but that's not necessarily the first ask, because it's often a thing that people say no to. They don't have the context for how or why. They can't see themselves in the folks running for office necessarily.
Yeah, there's a lot of misconception about like what it means to run for office. What offices can you even run for? What do they do? So yeah, starting coming right out with a you should run for office or do you want to run for office? Oftentimes is going to be absolutely not. That's either a horrifying concept or I don't even know what you're talking about. So figuring out ways to get them in the door, like the pissed off ads that we're running. Really using that, like channeling that energy and being like, here's a thing you could do, but
Yeah.
it's like learn more. It's not just like immediately commit to run for office.
Yeah.
So like so bringing the people in so that we can like share all of our resources with them and be like, okay, well, here are your options. Um, and I think also tailoring the ask sometimes to be like, well, maybe you don't immediately run for big scary state rep. Maybe
Yeah,
instead you run for a ward election official in your city and get your toes wet there and serve your community that way, see what it's all about, feel the energy of like being in office, serving in office, sure, is like hard. Campaigning is hard, but it's also like can be incredibly rewarding. Like you're doing a really incredible thing by serving your community in office. And so just like getting in there and starting just getting a taste of that energy can make such a difference.
And
absolutely.
we've seen actual like success stories. We have State Representative Jessica Grill, who represents Manchester's Ward 12. Again, Beck can fact check me on that. Yes, okay.
Mhm.
And Jess was, we met Jess through engaging in some voting rights work. She started taking some actions with us. And then we're like, you should go to committee and testify on some of these bills and actually voice your opinion. And she did. She testified. One of my favorite things we've ever like posted on the internet was like a then and now, and it was of Jess Grill testifying before the House Election Law Committee about a piece of anti-voter legislation. And then within a year from that photo, she had decided to run for office, got elected, was serving in the New Hampshire House, and then was also a clerk on the House Election Law Committee, and now had like direct voting power and a seat at the table when these things were being debated and voted on. And that is such a success story. And we've had more of those too. I mean, Karen Hegner, also from
Mhm.
Manchester, who engaged with us and came to some different trainings and became a really powerful voice in her community, ran for office, and now she's on the House Committee on Housing, and was an important vote to have. And we were voting on some pro-housing bills this year. So there is proof in the pudding, I guess, of
Yeah,
talk to people about the stuff they care about, get them mobilized, and then start telling them to run for office. And maybe they will. And when they will, they win. And then they get to vote on these things that will make a difference for all Granite Staters, but really also like again back to young people in New Hampshire who need a place to live, who want to be in a state that has access to voting and all that kind of stuff.
absolutely. And I think it's fascinating if you look at who's running, even on the federal level. Chris Pappas was like running as a young person, I think for like a county attorney and or was it county treasurer? Believe he served as a state rep at one time. Like this
Mhm.
is
Mm-hmm.
this is bench building. Now he's running for the U.S. Senate. I believe two Keith Howard and Carly Barriont were both folks that engaged with you guys around their local elections. Heath's the state rep. Carly Barriont's a select board member in Hampton. Like that's just a building block for building an amazing bench of folks.
It's actually become like, yeah, like a little bit of a good there if anyone are listening to this, like a little bit of a good problem to have because yeah, we've been so focused on like building our bench and our pipeline here in New Hampshire. And now we have these amazing electeds who are like taking the big step and they're reaching out to us like, hey, and we're like, okay, we've got to get our stuff together because our people are
Mhm.
getting to that point and it is the work of building this bench and building the pipeline.
The pipeline is pipelining.
Yeah.
The pipeline is pipelining. And also like we have the pipeline out because also people in New Hampshire are interested in like young energy, young people stepping up to the plate to solve these issues.
Yes.
And when you look at the numbers, yeah, that we've been able to get elected in the last few years, not just in the state house, but also um, in local positions across the state. Like I think the most recent town meeting day, we had another like about 100 young people that got elected to seats all across the state, and every spring that's been happening for a while now, and that builds up.
Yeah, it really changes the conversation. And you look at towns, especially around housing issues, doing some really, really interesting things with ADUs and some of their zoning laws. Like I think having this like influx of young people in the mix has been really interesting for just and also having people understand that like that's where a huge amount of these decisions are made. And I think that's a huge
Yeah.
part of what you all do of like helping young people. Like one example I wanted to show real quick was that was just explaining what the heck town meeting day is, who you're electing. So like not even educating just the candidates, but like really educating people per se of like what are these offices, what do they do, how do they impact your daily life, even if you're not running for them, that you're voting for them, that you're bothering to get out because Lord knows I've got two small children, and that's getting out to do anything is challenging, especially when they keep changing the absentee voter laws and making it harder for working families to vote. And really knowing why this matters and being motivated to come out, I think, is so important. So yeah, that's really really good. Do you all have favorite campaigns that we've run or examples where well we work
I
together?
do.
Okay.
Yes. I have a recent one too. Um, so 603 Ford and the Ford Foundation, along with our partners at New Hampshire Youth Movement, shout out to them, have been organizing around the City of Manchester's Land Use Code Reform Project, a mouthful. They're updating their zoning ordinance to allow for more housing types, more affordable housing. And we have had, a pretty long timeline with this. This is a project we started before last summer. But one of the coolest parts of it was during a little bit of a lull in the timeline where the city staff and elected officials were kind of looking through data and some input from the community, and there wasn't like a lot of talk around this, so we wanted to just keep the momentum going and let folks know that like this hasn't died down just because it's slowed down for a minute. So with the help of y'all, we came up with some really great digital ads and even paired it with a billboard that we had placed in downtown Manchester, which was really cool. Not only like because it's a huge billboard and when do you get to do one of those, and that was a really fun thing, but also because we really did see an uptick in our actions that we had going at that time. What we were asking for people to do was use an email tool that we built on our website, the Manchester Neighbors Welcome website, which is manchesterneighbors.org, which y'all also helped us with, to go onto our website and just send an email to key decision makers, letting them know that you support a really bold update to the zoning ordinance and that you want more housing. It was a pretty like all things considered, like, low key kind of ask. But we did during that time, just from having the digital ads and the billboards out, see a pretty steady stream of emails every week. And also, on the other side of that, not only is the community getting to be engaged with this and be reminded of it, but also we know of Manchester electeds who saw this stuff, and we actually had some of them who we're friends with who called us up and were like, what's the story with the billboard? And we got to be like, listen, we're just making sure everyone knows that we still care about this and we're still in this. But it was really impactful. And I think too, it also goes to show that like you can be kind of creative. Like the only reason we landed on a billboard was because someone brought it up in a meeting as a cool idea, and we took it seriously and recognized that like it was something we hadn't done before, and it was a way to reach potentially a new audience and also get a broader audience's eyes on something. So yeah, it was also a good way to like kind of be creative and then test out like I think we had a couple meetings of like what the billboard should look like and the from the imagery to the language. So yeah, that's one of my real favorites recently.
Just one quick thing on that, because one of the things I love about that is this idea that we layer the different types of communication, and also working with Danielle consistently for design, you have a very consistent brand, even if it's like a project like Manchester Neighbors Welcome, that you can have multiple pieces out there that all look the same, all feel the same, or at least they feel on brand, even if they have different messaging or trying to do different things with them.
Yeah.
So I know,
Another
yeah.
another whole component of that too, as you're talking about like the brand and like layering things, we also work with you guys to create those yard signs that had like like the same imagery and brand messaging as the billboard, but then we were able to put a QR code directly on those that would bring people to right where we wanted that action page to be. And that has also been super impactful. And they're out there. We ordered quite a few of them, and every time I go to the office, they're dwindling. So
The other thing, I was just looking at all the ads we've run just on Meta, and we do other platforms as well for y'all, in the last year. I think a piece that I wanted to talk about was really the fact that, like, because we work with all the other things that you are doing in the field and at the State House, all of that, and amplifying all the things you're doing on your organic social media, um, there's a lot of really interesting knock-on effects of that. So we reached 225,000 people in New Hampshire over the past year, which is wild if you think about that in the context of like the voting age
yeah,
population.
that is so
Um,
cool.
and then we reached them at a frequency of basically like 10 times. They saw on average 10 of our ads over the past year. So not everybody saw every ad, and there were definitely smaller pieces or smaller regional trainings, but in aggregate, what I think what I'm trying to talk about is, like, I think working consistently with each other, we have this ability to put the work that you all are doing in front of folks in a really consistent way. So you all actually have really strong recognition of who you are and what you do. And I think that really helps. It helps your recognition amongst donors and activists who are or potential allies or are currently allies, because they see what you're doing, because we deliberately put that in front of them. And I think it also helps for recruitment, because we're talking to, like, you all are a recognized entity. Oh yeah, 603 Forward does that. If I'm thinking about running for office, well, you don't have to think about who the heck does that work in the state of New Hampshire, because you are in front of those people regularly.
I love that you said that. That's what we want. Like everyone, yeah, like, and that's like, to be candid for a moment, sometimes can be like the thing we have to think a little bit harder about with our advocacy stuff is like, yeah, ultimately what we want is for people to run for office and always making sure that like we have this flavor of like, you can be a decision maker, you can be in the driver's seat. And even like for our advocacy team who are out there meeting with folks, having, these great community conversations, like you guys can always take action by sending an email, calling, speaking with your legislator. But you know how else you can take action? By running for office. And yeah, I think too, like to bounce off what you said for a moment, Theo, of like we're a recognized entity and people see that. It's also because like we are working with y'all to be very intentional around getting these types of messaging and these ads into these communities. And there's also something like Beck can talk about, but in doing it in different ways, not just like ads on Facebook and Instagram, but also, ads that are on the website or on websites and are like following people through their user experience, which, you need to you need to be asked or think about running for office a few times before you actually make the jump in. So I do think like every time you see it, you take it a little bit seriously. And you're like, what if I actually did click that link and look into running for office with that org? Would that be so bad? Their stuff looks cool.
And that's what I just give credit to you all for. Right? It's like you work with us on a monthly basis, and you run ads every month of some kind. You're putting something out there because you guys are always working. You're a year-round organization that's always pushing, always thinking about what's happening. But really, um, I think this is something that other organizations could really model off of. There's always a consistent digital component to the work that you're doing. You're always
Because there's
amplifying your
always
brand.
something happening. That's
Yeah.
like that's what folks need to take away is like there's always something happening. Whether it's like even if you're just thinking about like, oh, we should mobilize people around like elections. Okay, well, every spring you've got town meeting day, and every fall you have either municipals or a state house election, and then sometimes you have presidentials and federal races thrown in there. There's always for worse or worse, some, can I swear?
Yeah.
Some bad things, some BS happening at the state house that is worth talking about. Uh yeah, and that's the thing, like when you zoom up for a moment, there's always something happening.
Yeah.
And for a minute, to reference something Beck brought up earlier, for a minute we were like, you know, when you're trying to follow the vibes of society and they're not great, it can be like, what do we do? But then it was like, everyone's pissed off. What if we just run an ad that's like, pissed off question mark, run for office? And that was really just in response to, we saw all of these protests and gatherings happening. We knew of all this stuff that was happening. People were angry, so
Yeah.
tap into that simply.
One of
That's
the
my,
Yeah, go for it. Sorry, Daniel.
oh, that's okay. I was just saying that was one of my favorite ads. I think that that's a great opportunity. There's a
Yeah.
That
lot
is a
of
good one.
happy people with what's happening.
And
There
And
was another
also,
one.
you go back.
That's just that's another one that we did, that we also did yard signs for, that
That's what I
also
was
look
gonna say.
so good and get
And
lots
so
of
many
attention.
people, like community leaders, we bring them with us, we set them up when
Hmm.
we're tabling. So many people who are like, run a local chapter of some organization or like recruiting for some office. They're like, oh, I want some of those so I can put them up, because they also
Hmm.
recognize that, like, it's not just like an interesting messaging, but that it's something that people are going to see and respond to. And we've actually got, just from those yard signs, had lots of great conversations.
one of the things that I think is so important about the work that you do, is that you give people practical like channels for their anger, their frustration. Like this is a scary, tough time to be on the planet and to live in this country with all the craziness going on. There's a lot of crazy things happening at the State House, in New Hampshire, and then across the country. And I just speaking purely personally, it's really easy to become kind of overwhelmed with that. And the easiest thing to do is kind of like, hide in your hole and, pull the blankets up over your head and you disengage. And I feel like that's for our generation, a lot of folks have. And what I love about the work that you all are doing is saying, no, there are actually practical things that you can do at every level, but especially state and locally. And maybe you can't run for office, but you sure the heck can come and testify. And it's been really, really interesting and fun and empowering as well, just on our side of things, to see the outpouring around housing, around voting rights. When you give people both information, but also empower them through like really straightforward steps of like, here's an action you can take. Honestly, I feel like that's the medicine our generation needs, our democracy needs. Like, yeah,
Yeah, there's like a huge, like a massive housing shortage. We hear it all the time. Everyone talks about it. And this session, well, last session, there were some great house pro housing wins and some progress made. And I really do feel like it's because of all of these different orgs from across the spectrum and all these different sectors who like saw this as an issue and spent a lot of time engaging with their membership, engaging with Granite Staters around all the different ways that lack of housing impacts all of our communities. Um, and when I was at the State House testifying for housing bills, it was always amazing to me to not just be sitting with a bunch of lobbyists, but to have like actual people who are first time homeowners, who are renters, who are people who are struggling to find a place to rent, who are parents of folks with disabilities who, need to be able to provide the best situation for their loved ones, people who are worried about what their kids are going to do when they graduate college. Like the diversity in the room of people who were just showing up because, yeah, they were engaged around this issue. And now we get to celebrate the fact that we do have these wins. Yes, because of like great state reps who were young. I will also say the bills that got passed and the things that, are really worth uh celebrating. They're all worth celebrating. It's a bad way to put it, but like really worth recognizing are were championed by young people. But also like not just because those young people in the state house, but because people showed up and supported them.
yeah,
And there were like, we have in New Hampshire the ability to register your position on a bill, whether you support or oppose it online, which is an important thing for state reps to just kind of be aware of, like what the pulse of folks that we're at. And when you looked at a lot of those housing bills, the people who are signing in support to oppose unnumbered them, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but like a lot, like, I don't know, 5 to 1 or something. No one's gonna fact check me on that, but like it was sizable. um yeah, and again, like, because people engaged, people cared, people showed up. And then also shout out to those young people like Allie Murray, who sponsored a bill that we called Homes Near Jobs, which will allow for there to be more residential units like apartments and commercial zones, which will create more walkable communities, will allow people to live closer to their places of employment and stuff like that. And that's because, they live in Manchester. They see what downtown Manchester's like. They realize that walkable communities and mixed use neighborhoods are what young people want. It brings life into these communities, and they did something about it. And we're all going to benefit now.
Absolutely. And that's such a perfect example of like multiple parts of what you do and what we do with you coming to fruition. That's a person who had engaged with the 603 forward elections process and was, so we did, if I'm remembering correctly, independent expenditure in that race. That's someone that you interface with and work with in terms of the training and the advocacy, like that. Those are folks coming to testify on that bill that came, in part because they had been brought into your email list and into
Mm-hmm.
your through some of the social media and advertising pieces. So what you get is the like finished product, as you will, of this great piece of legislation addressing a real issue, is the product of like year-round organizing and advocacy in different pieces. And that's what I really wanted to talk about, because I think that's what's really special about what you all do and how we work with you and what's different about that. Because I feel like it's really easy for groups to come in and talk to a digital vendor and say, hey, we need like one ad on electing a candidate, and I think their job is done. And I get, because there's dollars and cents attached to this kind of year-round organizing, but also to see like an outcome, you have to kind of go back through these component pieces, and at lots of different parts of the process there was digital work done, there's graphic
Yeah.
design work done, and working really closely in tandem with the amazing organizing work that you all are doing on staff as well, but that those really kind of work with each other.
Yeah, it's like the wraparound of identifying the thing, coming up with the campaign, working with you all to literally from like the text on it to the vibe and the colors, and then thinking through like the people we want to see that and get that in front of in the placement. And then also for us, it's like the wraparound support. Like when, we meet, you only talk to Beck and I, but then Beck and I go back to our team and it's like, okay, we're running this ad, and Beck on and their leadership development team will sometimes implement a whole system of tracking who is engaging with that, how quickly we're following up with them, how many times we're following up with them, what the outcome of that was like. Because if people are taking time to like engage and interact on an ad and like, give you even just a minute to take an action, you should follow up with them, because if they're a connection and a person worth talking to. And same with advocacy. Like when we're running those ads, it's every Monday we're pulling a list of people who have engaged with us that are brand new in the last 7 days, and we're immediately trying to reach out to them. And also because the next time they see something, they're that much more likely to engage with it and then maybe share it or send it to people that they know in their network, because they know that we're the friendly faces who wanted to meet up with them and get a coffee and talk about why exactly they're pissed off about the lack of housing in their community or the lack of childcare.
Absolutely, and neither component really fully works well without the other one. I mean, like
Yeah.
we can, and we have this on our with our commercial clients and other nonprofit clients of like, we can get you leads, but if you don't do anything with them, or you don't call them and like actually do the groundwork to do that, that doesn't work. The other piece that I really love of like, so we have a it's like our like mother sauce of audiences that we run a lot of our like content too, through for you all on a lot of the like advocacy work. What's cool about that is it it builds on both the on the groundwork and the organic social media work that you all do. So you have an amazing like team that does that. So you have really high quality content, which is super helpful.
Thank you.
But a lot of our advertising audience pulls in folks who've liked and engaged with your organic social media, and that's super helpful. So basically, instead of advertising to like a fixed list, we're advertising to a dynamic list. So people are coming into this list all the time
Yeah,
through, they saw you and Beck at Pride in Claremont, or in other staff in Concord, or in Manchester, and they're like, "Who the heck is this organization?" And they look you up and they like an Instagram post. All of a sudden, they are getting pushed advocacy actions that they can take. And so what you did in
exactly.
person translates to organic social media translates to advertising, translates to advocacy, and then that person is running for office. But that's again like this is like a multi-year process.
It is. That's the thing. It takes time. And also I think too, like one thing made me think of when I was just listening to you too is also like the power of like boosting the organic stuff, like still like having a high frequency of good organic content, and then
Yeah.
also having like paid advertising that is complementary to that, but also sometimes like stands on its own,
Yeah.
and is its own ask or whatever it is. Yeah,
And that's another aspect of it too. So when we do like candidate advocacy, or like sorry, like candidate support, i.e., independent expenditure on behalf of candidates, if we're doing that on social media, all that engagement also gets sucked into our regular advocacy audiences. So folks who've really engaged with candidates that we like, again, those are probably good folks that we want to talk to. Another aspect of that I think campaigns and organizations are starting to figure out is like these lists of who we know voters are is only part of the picture, especially when talking to young people, especially with new people coming into the state, with New Hampshire. There's only, I think, a third of folks in New Hampshire were born here. So there's a lot of turnover. So two-thirds of the folks weren't born here. A lot of the voting age population shifts, especially in some of these cities. I lived in a really transient ward in Manchester. The voters who showed up every election could be really changeable. Um, so a lot of the way that we are doing this recruitment and advertising, over time, we've really learned to recognize that and change our model from like, hey, let's pull a list of registered voters that we want to talk to because we think they agree with us on the issues, to yes, that's a component of who we're talking to, but we're using things like geofencing and historical lookbacks around protests, or we are using in-person organizing, we're using issue-based organizing. That was one of the things I think it's always fun to learn from the opposition, but the Trump campaign in 2016 like changed how people think about that, because what they found is there's a whole bunch of people who weren't registered but had really strong feelings on issues that lined up with him, unfortunately. But they basically spent money prospecting of what if we get issues, what if we like put a really like high intensity ad, controversial ad in front of folks. A lot of people won't like it, and the people who do, maybe folks we've never talked to, aren't registered to vote, but really care about one of these different things. And so we've done versions of that, of like talking to people about housing because they are pissed off because that's their lived experience. And these may be folks who have never voted in their lives, or never run for office, or are new to the state. Um, and really using that as a ladder in to engage with the political process. And I think that's so critical, because I think that's something we forgot about or unlearned, or
yeah.
organizations.
It's one of those things that we say a lot, but we like forget to actually do it and forget like what it means. But like actually just meeting people where they are and like talking to them in a way that connects with them and they understand. And even just like using like the big scary digital tools we have to like know if there's gonna be a big protest in Concord that's basically a counter protest to like the BS we're seeing in DC. Those are probably some like-minded folks that are worth getting. Exactly. Like let's fence that area and see who we can play around with, who we can interact with and follow up. And if like through our processes of relational organizing would kind of weed through them anyway. But yeah, like it's one thing we say a lot in this space. I think we actually forget to like do it and forget what it means, but like truly meeting people where they are, and recognizing that sometimes that's going to be just meeting them and being like knowing that they're pissed off about what is going on, and pissed off about the fact that yeah, they can't find a place to live, they can't afford to send their kid to school, whatever it is. Like, yeah.
Yeah, their property taxes keep going up because the budget downshifts a ton of cost to their town, and they're trying to figure out who the heck is responsible for that and how they're going to afford to live in New Hampshire. Um, yeah, absolutely. And I think that was also one of the fun things about having like working with you all on a like regular and like multi-year basis is that we have a set of tools that are continually changing, continually becoming more interesting, continually building capacity as the companies that build them and we discover like new ways to use them change, and we're able to come back to you and say like, what is it that you want to do? And then we come back and say like, either do we have a tool that already does this, or can we like break a tool and use it in a totally different way to get what we want going? And I think there's some really interesting pieces there. So even like we've used things like lookalike audiences. Can you take everybody who's testified on these bills from that through you all and try and find people like them? And that's something that the social media algorithms are really good at. Like it may be that they all like eating chocolate on a Tuesday, and we would have no way to guess that, but the meta algorithm can figure that out. And so that's a really interesting thing of like, how can we, like, I feel like organizing and advocacy is often really behind how powerful these tools are and can be. And part of this is
Yeah.
just a muscle thing of like not doing it enough. And you all do it enough to be able to see kind of the benefits of that. Because commercial like advertisers, Coca-Cola, whoever, they use these really interesting tools of understanding how you act online, how you engage in online spaces and use that to sell product. And I think it's really interesting to kind of twist that from its roots and use it for the good of like how do we find the people who want to be found, who really will engage with this stuff if you put it in front of them.
We were just having a staff meeting yesterday. We were talking about like social media trends and funny videos and just ways to stay relevant, like we all are always trying to do. And someone was like, "Oh, well, it can be difficult because so many of these things are trying to sell something." And I was like, "No, no, no. We're trying to sell something, and what we are selling is the ability to make your voice heard, to step up and run for office. And, we're selling that New Hampshire doesn't have to be this way. It can
Yeah.
be better. And I think, yeah, for advocacy organizations, like the thing is that, like, it can feel sometimes too big, or it can feel like not everyone's going to get it. But at the end of the day, we're always talking about stuff that are like literally affecting people's everyday life. And when you remember that and you just want to engage them around that, and like you'll find that people are going to talk to you and they're going to, buy what you're selling, I guess, to go back to that. Like people, I do think like naturally don't want to accept the fact that like, I just have to pay really high taxes and drive 3 hours to work because I can't find a place to live. Like, we're not accepting that. No, no, no.
Yeah.
We're changing it.
Yeah, and that's the beautiful part of like empowering folks of saying you don't have to accept that. I think in all my time I've been involved with candidate recruitment on various levels for about 10 years now. Really getting the message through to people of like, oh, like there's actually not that many barriers between you and having some sort of position that can change things. Like I think we get the message all the time these days that like, oh, it's all going to hell in a handbasket, and fair enough. But that the piece that's really false, I think, is that there's nothing you can do about it. And I think you guys do an amazing job of telling people like, yes, there are things that you can do about it.
There are
Here's five
things.
specific things you could do today to change.
Yeah. There's always something you can do about it, even if it's just like look around and find the other people who are not happy with how it is, and you just start scheming about what you're gonna do. Like there's always something you can do about it.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I'm so grateful for all three of you for hopping on and chatting about this, for our work together, and really excited for what we can do in the future.
Yes, thank you. No, this was so fun. It's been so great to get into, like you said, all this good trouble with you guys. And thank you so much for having us on. This was so
Yeah.
cool.
Thanks for being here. We'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Bye, friends.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.
Thank you.